Hey guys, tonight we step barefoot into the ancient dust of Australia's outback, where the stars look close enough to pluck, and the air smells faintly of smoke and eucalyptus. You're not in a museum or lecture hall tonight. You're crouched beside a slow burning line of fire, guided by elders who've used flame as both paintbrush and memory for tens of thousands of years. Around you, the desert stretches so wide and flat that the horizon seems to bend, and the nearest exit is probably a 4-day walk away. You may think you've hiked before, but out here, without a compass, GPS, or map app to whine at you, yeah, you probably wouldn't survive this alone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always amazing to see where you're all listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are crouched low on the red earth, the sky stretching above like a midnight canvas splattered with glitter. Every constellation seems sharper here. The Milky Way looks less like a suggestion and more like someone spilled powdered sugar across a black silk sheet. You feel warmth behind you, the fire, but not a bonfire, no marshmallows. This is fire country, and what's burning is a narrow, deliberate line drawn across the ground like ink on parchment. The man guiding it forward isn't rushing. He holds a smoldering stick like a conductor's baton, tapping it against clumps of dry grass. Each touch blooms into slow-moving flame. He's not trying to destroy anything, quite the opposite. This is an ancient controlled burn cultural fire, they call it now. But for tens of thousands of years, Aboriginal Australians have called it by many different names in many different languages, all carrying one meaning. This is how we care for the land. The fire glides forward, crackling gently. Behind it, ash. Ahead of it, undisturbed bush. You notice how the flames curve slightly, guided by subtle shifts in wind and moisture, and by the firekeeper's deep knowledge of both. It's not random. It's not chaotic. It's a story in motion. You glance at the other side of the fire line and see a long black shadow moving an elder wrapped in a kangaroo skin cloak, his face painted with ochre. He moves slowly, eyes on the horizon, whispering something as he walks. You ask someone nearby what he's saying. He's telling the land what we're doing, they murmur. So it understands? You raise an eyebrow so it understands, but you don't laugh. Something about the scene makes you hold your breath. You realize suddenly that this fire isn't just fuel and oxygen, it's language. Each flicker and curl is part of a larger pattern, something too vast to capture in your notebook. Historians still argue whether this practice should be called fire stick farming or ecological mapping, or whether that's just too Western of a framework to fit the indigenous worldview. What's agreed on is this: for over 50,000 years, Aboriginal Australians have used fire not to dominate the land, but to speak to it. The fire reveals pathways. It coaxes certain plants to bloom. It clears underbrush that attracts destructive blazes. It draws kangaroos back into grazed territory. It exposes water holes you wouldn't see otherwise. And in the smoke, you swear you can see stories. Nearby, someone chuckles. Bet your Google Maps can't do that. You smile but don't reply. Your hands are dusty. Your clothes smell faintly singed. And the stars, They haven't moved an inch. Farther along the line, a young boy drags a stick in the soil, mimicking the elder's movements. He doesn't light anything, just traces loops and swirls into the dirt. It looks like a child's game, but an older woman nods in approval. He's drawing the old paths, she says. From memory, you ask. From story, she corrects gently. That's how we teach them. Fire by fire, track by track. And now, you're noticing them too. Little cairns of stone here and there. Charred tree trunks in deliberate rows. Burn scars that form rough spirals or crisscross patterns almost like fingerprints left by someone thousands of years ago. This isn't destruction. It's design. And every burn, every soft hiss of grass curling into ash is a brushstroke on a continent-sized canvas. A dingo howls in the distance. You half joke, so, is this fire going to eat us? The elder grins. Only if you don't respect it. He's only half kidding. And so, you stay alert. You help rake away dry leaves ahead of the flame, careful not to interfere with the path already chosen. Your arms ache. Sweat beads on your forehead. But you feel strangely like part of something. Intentional. You've walked maps before on paper, on phones, on glossy hiking signs. But never like this. Never while watching the map burn itself into the earth, alive and smoldering. And still, the fire line glides forward quietly, efficiently, beautifully. Each curl of smoke whispers something. A warning, a memory, a direction. You kneel, touch the warm edge of the blackened soil, and think this might be the oldest kind of map you've ever read. You walk barefoot now, the soles of your feet coated with fine red dust. It clings warm and soft and somehow soothing, despite the jagged spinifex you step between. The fire behind you has died into smoke and memory, and ahead only open land. At first glance, it looks like nothing. Endless scrub. No signs, no trail markers, no footprints. But your guide hums a few low notes, then begins to chant slow, rhythmic with words that loop like the wind. This, you learn, is a song line, and you are walking inside it. To someone raised on Google Earth and GPS pins a song line might sound like a poem or a chant. But out here, it's more than that. It's a GPS, a family tree, a natural history textbook, and a spiritual reckoning, all rolled into one hypnotic melody. Each verse encodes direction. Turn when the river bends. Stop when the shadow of that hill touches your feet. Drink where the melaleuca trees grow thin. You don't see a map, but you hear one. And somehow, step by step, it starts to make sense. The man singing pauses and nods at a distant outcrop of rock. That's where the rainbow serpent left his scales, he says. You stare. Just a pile of granite, isn't it? No. He insists softly. Look again. And when you squint, the rock does shimmer faintly, like something once moved through it. Something immense and sinuous. Your breath catches. You nod. This is how direction works here, not via grids and coordinates, but through narrative geography. The land itself is a storybook. And if you know the song, you know the route. Anthropologists used to call songlines dreaming tracks, a name that sounds almost too mystical, too vague. But to Aboriginal Australians, the dreaming isn't just the past. It's the ongoing moment where ancestral beings carved the world and left trails behind trails you can still follow if you listen closely enough. You step around a termite mound. Your guide stops singing. Why did you pause, you ask. He smiles. That's the silence between verses. You blink. The silence is part of the line, he adds. Some places you don't sing. You remember quietly. Historians still argue whether song lines should be considered mnemonic devices, spiritual rituals, or legal contracts. In truth, they're all of those. A single line may pass through hundreds of kilometers across tribal territories, languages, and climates, yet still retain coherence. How? Because the land itself doesn't lie. A particular bend in a creek, a certain grove of ghost gums, they act as lyrical punctuation marks. Miss one and you're lost. Your guide resumes singing. He sways gently, voice low and melodic, and you feel like you're floating on the words more than walking behind them. The air shimmers in the heat. Mirage puddles flicker. Your feet ache, but your heart steadies. You pass a field of stones laid in deliberate spirals. Your guide says they're memory knots. Each twist marks a junction where one song line intersects another. You ask how many lines exist. He chuckles. Count the stars. You pass a dry riverbed. Here the song shifts into a different dialect. A second elder joins in harmonizing with the first. Their voices overlap, then separate, then braid again. You hear birds mentioned and dust, and a phrase that translates roughly to where the emu sleeps inside the ground. A subtle reminder of an underground spring nearby. Not a single word in this song is wasted. It's geographic code embedded in myth. And it's not just memory. It's shared memory, repeated for generations, sung from one region to another, with each community adding their own verse. The emu reference makes you grin. You remember that time last year when you got lost on a hiking trip and had to call emergency services. And here, a 5-year-old could walk to the next village using just a lullaby. Farther on, your group pauses near a grove of desert oaks. A child recites part of the song line, not singing, but whispering, like she's tasting the words. Her grandmother nods and corrects the rhythm gently. No scolding, just calibration, like tuning an instrument. You sit cross-legged and stare at the trees. The song continues even without sound, and for a moment you realize something uncomfortable. You've never actually memorized your world. Not like this. You rely on devices, apps, networks. Take away your battery and your confidence withers. But here under this vast sky, someone's great-grandmother could walk across 1,000 kilometers, guided only by melody and stone and wind. You lie back eyes to the sky and listen to the last line of the song trail off. Silence again, but this silence doesn't feel empty. It feels full, like the land is humming beneath you, echoing the story just told. Your fingers are stained now, not with ink or paint, but with charcoal sand and sweat. The last hour has been slow, not because of exhaustion, though your legs are definitely protesting, but because something sacred is unfolding around you. You're sitting in a shallow depression of earth, arranged loosely in a circle with a handful of others. In the middle is a fire. Not for warmth, not for cooking. This fire is for drawing. The elder beside you drags a glowing stick through the sand, leaving black trails that curl and cross. At first, it just looks like lazy doodles. But the longer you stare, the more the lines begin to resemble the terrain you just crossed, a rocky ridge here, a dry creek bed there, the curve of that wind-smoothed hill. He sprinkles fine ash across a section of his drawing, then sweeps it with a fan of emu feathers. That's the water hole, he says. You nod, unsure how something so delicate can hold so much weight. But you can feel it. This is cartography, just not the kind with grid lines and a north-pointing arrow. It's ephemeral geography, maps made to vanish. He lights another piece of kindling and leans in. The stick glows cherry red. He presses it into the sand, carefully burning a dotted line. That's the fire path, he explains. The one we walked last season. The heat curls the edges of a nearby leaf, and for a moment you wonder if the map might catch fire entirely. But no, this is all intentional. This isn't a sketch. It's storytelling with ember and breath. Anthropologists used to think Aboriginal people had no system of writing. But you're watching now, as entire landscapes are recorded and communicated using fire smoke and sand. It's not permanent, but that's the point. These maps aren't for hanging on a wall. They're for passing on in motion, teaching the next walker how to read the earth by feeling it underfoot. A young boy mimics the elder's movements, scratching a spiral into the ground and dotting it with red berries. You ask what he's drawing. The campgrounds, he says, where my mother was born. His spiral might be less precise than the elder's, but the pride in his voice is enormous. And there's a quiet beauty to this kind of impermanence. Like Tibetan sand mandalas, these fire maps are destined to fade trampled, scattered by wind, dissolved by rain. But while they exist, they are powerful, and they demand presence. You can't screenshot a fire map. You can't take it home. You have to be here watching it form, inhaling the smoke, letting the dirt settle into your fingernails. You try making your own. The elder hands you a branch half burned at one end. You hesitate. Just follow what you saw, he says. You drag it through the sand in long arcs, trying to recreate that ridgeline you passed this morning. It's not perfect. Your water hole looks more like a pancake, but the others watch patiently, nodding, smiling. They aren't grading you. They're observing how you see. Historians still debate whether these fire and sand drawings should be classified as art map or ritual. And in true academic fashion, they often miss the obvious. They're all of the above and none. These aren't things to define. They're things to join. Your map ends with a faint burn. The ember fizzles, a puff of smoke escaping like a sigh. Don't blow it out, the elder says softly. Let the fire finish its memory, so you sit still. The others continue sketching. Some maps overlap. Others branch away. You begin to see how different fire lines might fork like rivers or converge like old song lines. The stories aren't isolated. They're woven the same way rivers, trails, and relationships are in the real world. At one point, someone stirs the ashes, and a breeze carries a bit of it into the sky. You watch it drift. Where does the map go now, you whisper? A girl answers without looking up. To the clouds. You think she's joking. Then again, maybe she's not. It's growing dark now. The fire maps lose their glow, just faint grooves in sand. But the knowledge doesn't vanish with the light. It remains in muscle memory, in breath, in the way everyone here now knows how to walk, from that flat hilltop to the shadowy grove just beyond. You wipe your hands on your trousers and exhale. There's something oddly satisfying about making a map that doesn't need to last forever. Something freeing. And tomorrow, when this circle is bare again, the path will still be there. sung, walked, burned, and brushed back into being by someone else's hands. By morning, the ground has cooled. The fire line is just a memory etched into the ash, and your footprints trail through it like a ripple in time. You wake to the sounds of rustling grass and quiet humming a melody different from yesterday's, but with the same soft pull. You rise, stretch the stiffness from your legs, and notice what today's canvas will be Spinifex grass. Miles of it, bristling and dry, reaching waist-high, and shimmering like straw under the rising sun. You pick up a stick without thinking. It's smooth, blackened on one end used before. Around you, others are already at work, dragging theirs through the red soil to carve loops and swirls, sometimes tapping rhythmically against the hardened ground. It's less of a drawing lesson and more of a ritual of orientation. No one tells you what to draw. You watch, absorb, and imitate. That's how most knowledge here works through performance. At first it looks chaotic, shapes drawn and redrawn. A woman marks a large circle in the dirt and begins filling it in with wavy lines. Someone else traces zigzags outward, away from the center, their stick raising soft puffs of dust as they go. Then a child barefoot, grinning, dashes across the patterns, dragging their heel in a line that cuts through them all. No one scolds. This, too, is part of it. The child's line might become something new, or it might fade. Either way, the canvas lives. You join in. Your stick draws a spiral. It's not particularly neat, but a young man beside you nods at it. Waterhole, right? You pause. Sure. Yes. A waterhole. He adds dots around it. These are where the frogs sing. He's not teasing. He's contributing. Out here mapping is a communal act, not a solitary one. There's no copyright, no mapmaker's credit at the bottom. Just layers upon layers of marks drawn, walked, sung, burned, and danced until the shape of the land settles into muscle memory. Historians often debate whether these ceremonial markings count as language. Technically, they aren't alphabetic, but they are systematic, symbolic, and deeply communicative. They encode directions, genealogies, seasonal cycles, even legal boundaries. And most importantly, they work. A nearby elder kneels and smooths out a patch of dust. He draws 3 lines spaced out like the spines of a leaf, then taps each one in rhythm. First burn, second burn, third, he says. He's not just reminiscing. He's remembering fire management patterns passed down for centuries, guiding how, when, and where to burn in order to bring food-bearing plants back into bloom. Different regions, different frequencies. You realize the land here has been so carefully cultivated for so long that what seems wild to an outsider is really a vast inherited garden. You trace over one of his burn lines with your stick, unsure if that's allowed. He watches, nods, then takes a handful of dry Spinifex and rubs it between his palms. Want to see something, he asks. You nod. He tosses the crushed grass onto a small pile of embers. The smoke it releases is sweet and sharp, like desert perfume. It curls upward, tracing a spiral, just like the one you drew. He leans close and inhales. That's the direction the wind's moving now, he says. You blink. You can smell the wind. He shrugs. If it matters, yeah. And here's the quiet truth. People in this place have had 50,000 years to figure out what matters. In the background, someone taps a stone against a wooden stick. A soft rhythm. Another joins in. Then someone hums. Before long, the air fills with a low looping tune. This isn't just a song. It's navigation music tempo, mapped to distance notes, matched to terrain. If you walked it in real time, each beat would align with a landmark. It's like Google Maps with a drum beat. You laugh quietly to yourself. And yet, as you watch them move, each person adding to the map, with fire dust voice or movement, you begin to see the genius of it. Every action reinforces memory. No lectures, no exams, just repetition until knowledge is woven into the body. One woman stares at your drawing and gently drags her heel through it, connecting your spiral to a jagged zigzag nearby. Now it makes sense, she says. You don't even ask what it means. You just nod. By noon, the wind picks up, and some of the drawings are swept away. No one panics. No one tries to preserve them, because they can be redrawn over and over. That's the point. The act of making the map is more important than the product itself. And as the spinifex shivers in the breeze, you think about all the places you visited with printed maps and tourist signs, and how little you remember from them. But this you won't forget. Not because someone showed you, but because someone included you. And now, with your stick still in hand, you're ready to keep walking. Night falls slowly out here. Not with a bang, not even with a flicker. Just a gentle dimming, like someone is turning down the desert's brightness dial, one click at a time. You sit cross-legged near the glowing embers of a fire that's been burning low since sunset. Around you, the elders and younger ones alike gather in a wide circle. No one is facing the fire directly. Everyone is turned slightly inward eyes, not on the flames, but on the storyteller seated just beyond them. She doesn't raise her voice, doesn't gesture wildly. She simply begins a meeting circle of memory. The tale she tells is old, ancient probably, maybe older than the hills around you. It's the story of a great kangaroo who chased a lizard across the land, carving valleys and pushing up mountains with their thundering feet. As she speaks, her hands trace curves in the sand, loops, spirals, jagged lines. Her fingertips become cartographic tools, sketching the geography of a myth. You've seen people tell stories before, but this is different. The tale isn't about the land. It is the land. Each element corresponds to something real. A tree you walked past earlier, a ridge you crossed at dawn, a waterhole still muddy from the last rain. These aren't metaphors. They're navigational anchors. The woman pauses, scoops up a handful of dust, and lets it fall slowly over her drawing. A small hush follows. Everyone watches as the fine grains settle. That's the fog, she says barely above a whisper. It hides the path when the ancestors don't want you to walk it. You shiver. Not from the cold, though it's creeping in, but from the intimacy of it all. You're witnessing something both completely grounded and utterly cosmic. Anthropologists used to think these stories were just folklore, pretty poetic and largely fictional. But then someone followed one. They traced it from one end of the country to another and found mapped within it every major water source along the route accurate to within meters. Not poetry, not metaphor. Survival code wrapped in fable. Your guide leans close and murmurs, "She's telling the Seven Sisters path." You nod like you understand. You don't, but you want to. The Seven Sisters, you'll later learn, are a constellation story shared across dozens of Aboriginal groups, with versions stretching from the central desert to the far north. The tale of their escape from a pursuer has been used for millennia to chart seasonal changes, mark safe travel routes, and signal taboo zones where food or water should not be taken. And the storytelling method, it's iterative, a performance. Tonight the story is told for the sake of teaching children. Tomorrow it might be told during mourning. The day after, during a rite of passage. Same beats, different emphasis. The land is the same, but the emotional weather changes. You listen as the woman's voice deepens. Now, she's describing a great snake who burrowed underground, creating deep springs. One spring, in particular, has never dried up. When she names it, an old man across the circle taps his cane once against the ground. You glance at him. He nods solemnly. That's where I was born, he says. You look down at the sand map. That curve, barely a finger's length across, is someone's origin point. It's not just topography. It's genealogy, identity, biography. And it makes you realize something strange. You don't know the name of the hill behind your childhood home. Not the real name. Not the name it might have had before streets were paved and parcels subdivided. But here, every bump in the earth has a name, a story, and a place in the living record of people and place. Historians still argue whether these stories count as historical record. Some say they're too mutable. Others point to geological events like volcanic eruptions or sea level rise that were encoded in Dreamtime tales thousands of years before Western science confirmed them. The sand map is mostly blown away now, disturbed by breeze and foot. No one cares. The real map was always in the retelling. A boy nearby is retelling it already. Not perfectly. He stumbles on a few lines, but he draws the same curved ridge in the dirt with his thumb, the same dotted trail. And an older cousin gently corrects him, not with scorn, but with rhythm. He repeats the words until the boy matches them. It's calibration, not criticism. The fire crackles. A few embers pop tiny sparks, darting upward like startled insects. Above the sky is impossibly clear. You spot the Seven Sisters constellation, just barely. You whisper their names, not their European ones, but the ones you just heard. You don't say them loud. You're not ready yet. The circle slowly breaks apart. People stretching, standing, brushing dust from their legs. But the stories linger. They always do. As you rise, you notice one last shape drawn faintly in the sand. A long snake winding between three concentric circles. You recognize it. It's the path you've been walking all day. And just like that, the myth has become your map. You wake to a deep rumble, not from the earth, but from the sky. A storm is building in the distance, clouds piling up like wool, dyed in indigo and coal dust. The air is suddenly heavy, sharp with static. You can taste metal on your tongue. A woman beside you raises her nose to the wind and smiles. Warupirdi, she says. Thunder is hungry today. You're told to stay close to camp, not because of the rain, it might not even reach here, but because this is when the spirits of lightning are believed to move across the land, carving paths of fire and power as they go. You've heard whispers about them since your first night, but now, with thunder murmuring overhead and the sky flashing in the distance, it all feels very immediate. The elder leading your small group today wears a cloak of old wallaby hide cracked and mended. He carries a forked stick, his lightning staff, he jokes, but the smile doesn't reach his eyes. There's a quiet respect in the way everyone steps carefully today. A storm isn't just weather, it's a reminder. You walk across a flat salt pan, your boots crunching softly. To your left is a dry creek bed. The elder stops and draws a shape in the dust with his staff jagged lines like a child's idea of a lightning bolt. Then he draws a circle beneath it. That's where the bolt hit, he says, long ago. Hit what you ask. He looks you dead in the eye. Everything? He's not being cryptic. At least not entirely. He's referring to one of the most powerful stories of this region. A tale of a sky being who hurled lightning spears down to earth in Narrated, carving out gorges and sinking plains with each strike. But it's not just a myth. That same area is known today for unusually rich deposits of fused quartz, formed some scientists speculate by ancient lightning strikes so powerful they left permanent geological scars. Historians still debate how much these stories reflect actual natural events. But there's mounting evidence that many dreaming tales, especially those involving storms, floods, or fire, align with real environmental changes that occurred thousands of years ago. Some even predate the last ice age. You continue walking as the thunder grows louder, pacing your steps to the flash and boom rhythm of the sky. The elder begins to sing not a full song line, but fragments, snippets about a spirit with fire hands and a tongue of smoke. Each time he reaches a phrase about water, he taps the ground with his staff, and soon you see why. Ahead lies a dry patch of land, cracked and beige, the kind of spot you'd dismiss as barren. But as he leads you closer, he points to a dip in the ground, hidden beneath low shrubs. This is where water gathers, he says, only after lightning. You crouch, feeling the slight change in air temperature here. Cooler, damp. Even in drought, the land remembers where the water goes. And so do the people. Another guide shows you a painting, etched into a rock face, half buried in spinifex. It depicts a long, snaking line, struck through with jagged bolts. Not artistic lightning bolts, the kind with sharp angles and cartoon flair, but realistic, grounded depictions, each stroke placed with care. This is the thunder trail, he explains. We only follow it during certain months. Too dangerous otherwise. You raise an eyebrow. Dangerous because of storms. No, he says, because of memory. You pause, unsure what to make of that. But when the lightning flashes again, and this time, very close, you begin to understand. Storms out here are not just meteorological. They are living reminders of events that shaped both land and lore. And the maps, they aren't on paper. They're in thunder patterns. Later, you sit under a rocky overhang while the storm passes nearby. The group doesn't talk much. They just listen. Each clap of thunder is read like a verse. Each flash of lightning interpreted for direction, mood, and timing. It sounds fantastical, reading storms like books. But you can't deny there's a system to it. The same way some people can read ocean currents or cloud formations, the elders here read the language of the sky. One woman points toward the horizon and says, "That one's heading for the Stone Sisters." You don't know what that means. Until later, when you walk that direction and come across 3 massive boulders standing side by side, natural, ancient, and unmistakably woman-shaped. And in the story, those sisters were guardians of the land turned to stone after defying the thunder spirit. You press your palm to one of the boulders. It's cool, slightly damp from the storm mist. You try to imagine A time when people didn't need seismographs or weather apps, just song shape and sky. And you realize you're not looking at an old superstition. You're looking at intergenerational climate data told through story, painted in lightning, and carved by time. The storm moves on. The air lightens. Someone laughs and says, "The sky's had its say." You smile, because yes, it has. The sun returns like it never left, hot, confident, and completely unapologetic. You walk with squinting eyes, now the heat rising off the desert floor in shimmering waves. It's the kind of heat that makes your thoughts wander and then evaporate. But today, you're not just walking, you're reading. Because scattered across this land, in places that seem random to the untrained eye, are tracks, some fresh, some fossilized, some so faint that you'd mistake them for scratches or shadows. Yet every one of them is part of an ancient language of movement. Your guide crouches suddenly. You follow, copying the way he plants one knee firmly in the dirt. He gestures at a faint U-shaped mark. "Wallaby," he says. Small, old, 3 days. You squint. It looks like a smudge. Then he points at a deep set of triangles that press sharply into the cracked earth. "Emu," he continues. "Male. Fast moving. Morning. Wait," you whisper. You can tell the time of day from a footprint. He shrugs. The shadow, the depth, the angle. The story is always there if you pay attention. Here, animal tracks aren't just signs of life. They are sentence fragments in a broader story. A trail of possum prints might lead to a seasonal waterhole. A series of snake slithers might indicate which path is safe and which is taboo. You don't learn this from books. You learn it by walking the land until its surface becomes legible. You spot a series of fine indentations, almost like brush strokes, leading off between two boulders. "What's that?" The guide grins. "Goanna, hunting ants." You follow the trail a few steps and suddenly realize that the goanna's path matches a dreaming story you heard last night. In the tale, a giant goanna chased a fire spirit through this exact valley, dragging his tail behind him, carving ridges as he ran. You look up, and sure enough, the land matches the myth. Historians still question whether the stories were made to fit the landscape, or if the landscape was interpreted through the stories. But most Aboriginal communities would say, what's the difference? The land is the story, and the tracks are its punctuation. A child runs ahead of your group, pointing out marks as he goes kangaroo, human dog. But then he pauses at something unusual. A strange spiral pattern in the sand, too neat to be natural. Your guide walks over and nods slowly. That's a ceremonial print, old, maybe even from before my grandfather's time. Why would someone make a print like that, you ask? To call someone, he says, or to mark a promise. You don't ask for details. Somehow, you feel like you're not ready for that kind of story. But you commit the spiral to memory just in case. As you climb a ridge, the ground grows rockier. Tracks vanish, but the guide keeps moving with confidence. Now, we read the stones, he says, and sure enough, you begin to notice subtle cues. Flakes of chipped rock arranged deliberately. Clusters of shells where no water flows today. Vertical grooves in boulders that seem suspiciously like claw marks, but are actually grinding stones used to sharpen spears or crush seeds. Everything here is residue, not abandoned, but left for someone to find someone like you. You kneel by a cluster of termite mounds. They rise like tiny cities from the sand. At first you think they're just termite mounds, But then the guide starts naming them. That one's the mother. That one's her sister. That one's the one who betrayed them. You glance at him, expecting a smile, but his face is serious. And as he begins to hum, you realize this isn't a joke. It's a miniature stage for retelling a Dreamtime tale, one that happened right here, or at least one that continues to happen here. Even insects, it turns out, are part of the map. You remember how cities are often organized around statues or public art markers that anchor space to meaning. And here, in the middle of a baking desert, the Aboriginal people have done the same thing. With animal tracks, stones, termites, and time, you pass a cluster of withered trees, their trunks white and ghostly. The guide stops and gestures again. 2 dingoes argued here, he says. How do you know, you ask? He smirks. Because they always do. Same season, every year. This is where they split. You let the thought settle. 2 dingoes. 2 diverging trails. Now, a landmark encoded into oral history repeated so many times, it's become a predictive model for dingo behavior. Better than an algorithm, really. You rest for a moment on a flat rock. The heat is intense now, but the rock holds shade from a spinifex bush. Beside you, someone has carved a small set of concentric circles into the surface. You run your fingers along them. Smooth, deep. Another waterhole, you guess. The elder leans down, squinting. No, he says. That's the memory of a camp, long gone. But it's still here, and he's right. Even long after the tents, or lean-tos, or smoke disappeared, the imprint of presence remains. You just have to learn how to see it, or in this case, track it. Your thumb traces grooves in a piece of wood. It's warm from the sun, but older than you by generations, a message stick handed to you with great care. At first glance, it looks simple. Just a stick, maybe a foot long, covered in carved notches and patterns, worn smooth at the edges from travel. But you're told this object has passed through dozens of hands across hundreds of kilometers, through deserts, forests, and ceremonial grounds. This one came from the coast, says your guide, squinting thoughtfully. 3 moons ago. You raise your eyebrows. You mean someone carried this all the way here? He nods. That's how messages used to move. Before mail, before text, before paper, or even bark scrolls. Message sticks were the diplomatic pouches of the continent. Carried between clans, they confirmed invitations, issued warnings marked marriages, requested permission to cross another group's territory, or brought news of deaths and births. Each was carved differently, sometimes uniquely, and was readable only by those taught to interpret its signs. You tilt it in your hands and notice the light catching small parallel lines, clusters of dots, and a strange curve that looks like a river bend. What does it say? Your guide chuckles. That's not for me to say. I'm not the sender. The idea strikes you as elegant, a message you can carry, understand just enough to know. It's meaningful, but not so much that you can misuse it. Information, with built-in limits. Later, another elder shows you something even more delicate, a folded bark scroll made from paper bark and tied with kangaroo sinew. Unwrapped carefully, it reveals ochre drawings, thin lines representing riverways, arcs for hills, and dots for campsites. You're stunned by how accurate it feels. It's minimalist cartography, almost abstract, but the symbols are instantly recognizable once you've walked the land. This one, you learn, was used as a teaching tool. Grandparents passed it to grandchildren before long journeys. Not to replace memory, but to support it, a visual nudge to recall what was already known by heart. Historians still argue whether Aboriginal Australians had a written language. Many insist these message sticks and bark maps don't qualify. But perhaps the better question is, why does writing have to look like the alphabet? These objects convey meaning. They're legible to those trained in the system, and they are as portable and durable as any ancient manuscript. The only real difference, they rely on context and relationship to be fully understood. You walk with the message, stick in hand for a while, tracing its curves with your thumb. It doesn't speak to you in words, but it feels like it's whispering something. When you hand it back, you feel strangely reluctant, as if part of your path just stepped away from you. Your group moves on, passing beneath eucalyptus trees that hum with bees. Along the way, you're shown how sticks are sometimes left half buried upright in the ground, like signposts. Their angle length and even the direction of their shadows can mean something. This one says someone passed this way, you're told, and that they went in peace. You ask how they know. The answer, as always, is a little smile and a shrug, because we taught them to say it that way. In some regions, message sticks were tied with feathers or etched with symbols from multiple dialects, allowing them to cross linguistic boundaries. In others, they were burned ritually. After the message had been delivered, the communication literally returned to the land. Each region, each nation had its own codes. But they all agreed on one thing. The message was sacred, and so was the journey. As you pass through a grove of cool shade, your guide pauses again and kneels near a rock shelf. He places his hand on a flat stone, then retrieves a small charcoal rubbing from his satchel. When he lays it down, you realize it's a rubbing of the very carvings beneath your feet, an old travel path etched directly into the rock, showing a winding route along a now dry riverbed. See, he says, even the rocks keep maps. You crouch beside him, running your fingers along the grooves. Some are shallow, others deep. He explains that the depth tells you how many generations the track has been used. You blink. You mean like, the more footsteps, the deeper the carving. He nods, like wear marks on old stairs. It's genius. A history of use built into the object itself. Not just where to go, but how long people have been going there. Further along, you spot a cluster of trees with bark, removed in long ovals, forming neat scars. The missing bark wasn't taken wastefully. It was used to make shields, canoes, even cradles, but the trees were left alive, still growing, still part of the landscape. And now, the scarred bark acts as living signposts, telling stories to those who can read the shapes. You trace one, wondering what was taken. A shield, a baby basket, maybe both. As the sun begins to dip again, the shadows lengthen, and every carved line grows bolder in the warm light. You realize these maps don't need battery life. Don't rely on satellites. They're held in objects passed hand to hand, tree to tree, generation to generation. And in this moment, you feel like you've been handed something more than just a message stick. You've been handed a permission slip to understand the land in a new way. You sit cross-legged on warm stone, now high on a ridge that looks out over a dry plain dotted with ghost gums and spinifex. Beside you, an elder dips his fingers into a small dish of ochre mixed with ash and water, stirring slowly like he's mixing soup instead of pigment. Across his lap lies a flat bark canvas, smooth, prepared, and ready. But this isn't just a painting session. This is aerial cartography, Aboriginal style. You're about to watch a map drawn for the sky. He begins with a series of concentric circles near the center bold red ochre pressed in with care. Then he dots small trails radiating outward in white ash, each one with tiny variations in spacing and tilt. Waterholes, he says, and the old men's camps. You've walked near one. You lean in, recognizing the spiral formation from 2 days ago. The one where you got lost for an hour before finding your way back to the group. You didn't realize it then, but it was a landmark with meaning. And now it's here, on bark being painted not for you, but for the spirits who watch from above. That's the part that stays with you. These maps aren't made just for humans. They're made to be seen from multiple perspectives, including from the ancestors, from the birds, from the dreaming itself. Why circles, you ask? Because that's how the sky sees us, the elder says without looking up. You blink, trying to wrap your head around the idea. But it makes sense. When you climb high enough, even a twisted river looks like a looping brushstroke. Even fire scars make spirals and waves. Some anthropologists call this practice vertical storytelling, the act of depicting landscapes as though viewed from above. But here, it's never been a theory. It's tradition. For thousands of years, Aboriginal artists have painted with the full knowledge that these images, formed in sandbark or skin, represent landscapes not as humans walk them, but as spirits might fly them. You watch as the elder adds a dotted path between two water holes. He doesn't explain it immediately, but a few minutes later he turns to you and says, "That's the emu's trail, the one from the dreaming story." He nods. When the emu fled the fire, that's where she ran. And again, the myth maps perfectly onto real terrain. You saw those two water holes. You crossed that shallow gully between them, and you realize you've been walking inside a painting this whole time. Historians still argue about the purpose of these artworks. Some say they're religious, others say practical. But most Aboriginal artists would say there is no separation. A painting can be both sacred and utilitarian, a prayer and a direction sign, a work of beauty and a spatial memory bank. As the painting continues, others gather. One brings a small bundle of feathers and lays it beside the canvas. Another brings sand, sifting it over certain lines to blur them, representing time past trails no longer safe to follow. A woman kneels and sings softly, her melody matching the rhythms of the brush. The elder paints not just locations, but relationships. Who traveled where? Who met whom? Which paths are open and which are forbidden? He adds colors: red for clay country, yellow for desert, black for stone, white for ash. It's abstract, but not obscure. Every stroke means something. You ask quietly, "How do you learn what it all means?" He glances sideways, the same way you learn to walk, 1 foot at a time. Later, the painting is left out to dry, not hung on a wall, not framed, just resting on stone, catching wind and dust and sun. It isn't meant to last forever, but it's part of a cycle: painted, remembered, sung, walked, and eventually painted again. Someone offers you a brush. Try. Your hands shake. You dip into the ochre and mark a small line copying the elder's dotted style. It's messy, uneven, but no one laughs. Instead, a young girl leans over and adds her own line beside yours, parallel, tighter, more confident. She smiles. "Now it's a story," she says. And you realize maps here are collaborative. No single author, no ego, just collective memory made visible. You take a step back and look down at the whole canvas. To an outsider, it might look abstract. Dots line circles. But to you, it's starting to hum with familiarity. That bend in the path. You walked it. That cluster of dots you camped nearby. The red spiral. That was the whirlwind dust storm 2 nights ago. And then you look up. The ridgeline on the horizon matches the ridgeline in the painting. Almost perfectly. The sky, the land, and the bark all align. In that moment, you realize this isn't just a painting. It's an aerial snapshot of a world held together by memory, not pixels, not property lines, not border checkpoints, but by shared experience, song, and slow-burning story. You sit quietly, the wind stirring your hair as the bark gently curls at the edges. You feel a dry breeze kiss your cheek as you kneel at the edge of a scrubby plain, watching smoke rise in slow, deliberate tendrils. It's not wildfire. It's not panic. It's planned, quiet, like lighting a candle before bed, except this candle is a low, creeping fire line, and it's sweeping through the bush like a velvet ribbon of heat. You're not afraid. Not anymore. You've learned by now that this isn't destruction, it's design. This is fire farming. And today you're not just watching it, you're part of it. An elder hands you a smoldering stick, just a little piece of burning bark, no bigger than your hand. He nods toward a patch of dry grass, carefully sectioned off with rocks. Your turn. You walk slowly, bend down, and place the flame against the base of the grass. It catches sizzles, then sighs into life. Immediately, the elder tosses a green leafy branch onto the flame. It pops, releasing smoke rich with eucalyptus and something floral. He watches it curl upward. That tells us the wind's right, he says. You nod like you understand. You sort of do. The smoke rises straight for a moment, then curls left. That means the fire will bend to the left too. Predictable, intentional. This isn't burn everything and hope. This is ecological choreography. You move with the group, slowly burning one patch at a time. Not too much. Never too much. Each controlled fire opens up. The land clears out invasive brush and coaxes native seeds to wake from dormancy. Some of these plants, like firegrasses and certain wattles, only germinate after fire. If you never burn, they vanish. If you burn too much, they vanish faster. So Aboriginal fire farming is about balance, frequency, timing, knowing which species need heat and which need protection, and knowing how to read the land like a patient feeling its pulse, diagnosing its patterns. Historians used to dismiss Aboriginal fire knowledge as primitive, but recent studies are reversing that view. Controlled burning practices developed by Aboriginal peoples are now recognized as some of the most sophisticated ecological techniques on Earth. In fact, modern fire ecologists are relearning from indigenous groups how to prevent catastrophic megafires by burning smaller, smarter, and with respect. You pause to watch an old woman working alone, her hands weathered and steady. She lays out a pattern of smoldering sticks in a triangle, then clears a ring around a tree trunk. She's saving the bush tomatoes, someone explains. You'd never even seen the tiny plant there before. But she did. Later, you walk through the already burned section, cooled to ash and charcoal. And it's not lifeless. You see movement, tracks. A goanna scurries across your path. A flock of galahs wheels overhead. And sprouting from the edges of yesterday's burn are green shoots, delicate and determined. That's when it hits you. The fire isn't just clearing land, it's painting maps and soil. You see it now. Darker patches that show where the burn stopped. Lighter rings that hint at natural fire breaks. Trails that lead to food sources, water holes, nesting sites. Even if you didn't know how to read a map, your feet would learn just by walking here. Burned ground is cooler, easier to travel, less likely to surprise you with a snake underfoot. Fire maps the land into memory, your guide says, but only if you remember to read it. There are rules, of course. Sacred sites must never be burned. Certain trees must be circled, not singed. Women lead burns in some areas, men in others. Each region has its own rhythm. And if a rule is broken, bad fire, says the guide. It forgets who it is. You chuckle. Fire with an identity crisis. He smiles, but doesn't answer. Instead, he points to a distant hill. That burn line is from my grandfather's time, still visible. You strain your eyes. It's faint, but yes, a straight edge of darker green splits the hillside. A legacy. A sentence written in ash still being spoken. Further down the track, you come to a place where no fire has passed in years. The difference is stark. The underbrush is tangled dry, full of deadfall. It's harder to walk here, harder to breathe. The land feels nervous. You look at the elder. He nods grimly. This is how country gets sick. It's a strange phrase, sick country. But you've heard it before. To Aboriginal Australians, land isn't property, it's kin. It has moods, rhythms, and needs. And fire is one of the ways it's kept healthy, like brushing tangled hair or exhaling a long-held breath. You retrace your steps back toward the burn line. It feels lighter there, open, honest, and suddenly you realize this isn't just land management. It's cartography in flame. Each burn carves out a new line, a new space, a new possibility. And each year, that line shifts slightly, updating the map, not with new roads, but with new relationships between people, plants, animals, and place. When you lie down that night, the smell of ash still in your clothes, you imagine a world where every map was temporary, every direction a conversation, every path a pattern of trust, and you fall asleep, imagining the fire still moving gently across the land, clearing space for something beautiful to grow. The wind is different today. It doesn't whistle or sigh, it listens. You hike in silence, surrounded by vast open plains that seem to stretch forever. There's no chant this time, no painted map, no fresh burn line to follow. Just footsteps in dust. And yet, you're still walking inside a story. This is the part they didn't warn you about, the silence between the stories. You pass a line of low hills, all dappled in shadows. Not a word from your guide. No hum, no gesture. Just walking. The others do the same. No one breaks the quiet. You want to ask what's going on, but something about the air, the stillness, stops you. It's not awkward. It's intentional. Later, your guide speaks in a near whisper. This part of the song line doesn't have a song. You frown. What do you mean? Doesn't every stretch have a melody? He shakes his head. Some places don't need words. They remember themselves. It sounds poetic until you realize he's dead serious. These silent zones are built into the structure of many song lines. Gaps, rests, pauses. They might represent a place where nothing happened in the dreaming, or where something happened that's too sacred, too sorrowful, or too dangerous to name aloud. The silence isn't an absence, it's a boundary. You step carefully, not out of fear, but out of reverence. The land here feels dense, like it's holding its breath. Historians still puzzle over these unspoken segments. Some theorize they're mnemonic devices, spaces to let the singer catch their breath, or to mark transitions. Others believe they are ceremonial blackout zones, deliberately omitted from common retellings. But to those who carry the lines, they are reminders that not all knowledge is for sharing. And in a strange way, you respect that. In your world, everything is uploaded, recorded, documented. But out here, the most sacred information is protected not by passwords or fences, but by silence. You pause near a grove of river-red gums. There's a faint breeze. A few leaves rustle. That's it. No birds, no insects. Just the steady creak of the old wood in the heat. This place, your guide says finally, is where two stories refuse to meet. You glance at him. They come close. He continues pointing down each side of a narrow gully. One from the north, one from the west. But they never cross. Why not? He just shrugs. It's not their business. You laugh quietly. But as you continue walking, you begin to feel it. The two paths, two songlines coexisting but not touching. You imagine stories like rivers, each flowing with their own tempo, sometimes parallel, sometimes opposite, sometimes evaporating entirely. And in between stillness, you remember a moment earlier in your trip, on the second day, you think when the group suddenly stopped speaking for over an hour, you had assumed everyone was just tired. But now you wonder, was that one of these places a remembering through not speaking moment? You don't ask. You let it rest. Further on, a young boy draws in the dirt with a stick. Just random loops. But his father gently brushes the marks away with his foot. Not here, he murmurs. The boy nods, already understanding. Some places are for unmarking. You cross a dry creek bed and climb onto a flat rocky ledge. The view opens up an enormous horizon of dust, heat, and memory. Here, finally, your guide begins to hum again. Soft, uneven, like picking up a sentence mid-thought. The song resumes, not with a grand opening, but like a dream you drifted back into. And that's how you begin to understand the rhythm song, silence song. Like breath, like heartbeat, like the natural rhythm of being in place. Later, you sit beside a termite mound, sipping warm water from a goatskin flask. Someone nearby starts recounting a dreaming story you've heard before, but skips a large section in the middle. You almost interrupt to ask why, but you stop yourself, because now, you know some parts, you walk, not speak. And when you stand to leave, you take nothing. Not a stone. Not a stick. You brush away your footprints behind you, just slightly, the way you were shown. Because here in the silent places, even leaving no trace is part of the map. Night wraps around you, like a worn blanket, soft, and just a little scratchy. The stars are thick again, impossibly thick, like someone spilled glitter across velvet. But tonight isn't for sleeping. Tonight is for ceremony. You sit near a fire, one of many dotting the clearing, each surrounded by figures in motion. The air is heavy with eucalyptus smoke and the slow beat of clap sticks. There's no talking, just movement rhythm. and a kind of focused stillness that's hard to describe. You've been told not to record, not to sketch, not even to whisper. Just watch, because what's happening around you is more than performance. It's a remapping of the world. A group of dancers enters the circle, their bodies painted in earth ochres, white lines across chest and thigh spirals on arms dots like constellations across cheeks and shoulders. One carries a wooden spear, another a shield carved with symbols you've seen in bark maps. As they move, you realize their steps are landmarks. Each footfall matches a river bend, a ridge, a campsite. Their bodies are living coordinates, and their path through the sand. It's a song line being redrawn, not just told, but embodied. You feel a sudden chill, though the fire is warm. It's the weight of understanding settling in. This isn't just a story about the past. It's an act of geographic memory made flesh. The songs begin, low, long, vibrating syllables, repeated in a cadence older than language. The beat is slow, steady, hypnotic, and in the firelight, every movement takes on double meaning. A leap might be a mountain. A crouch might be a waterhole. A spin might signal a seasonal shift or a boundary. You look at the others around the fire, elders, children, travelers like yourself, and they're not just watching, they're remembering. Because this performance isn't entertainment, it's instruction for the land, for the people, for the future. Historians still struggle to classify these ceremonies. Are they ritual, law, dance, religion? The answer, as always, is yes and no. What you're witnessing is a multidimensional map, a tool for transmitting culture, knowledge, and survival. It operates in song, in gesture, in soil, and in time. You notice that not every participant is dancing. Some are sitting apart, painting on bark or stones, syncing their brush strokes to the rhythm. Others walk in quiet circles around the clearing, placing carved wooden totems upright in the sand. One man walks backwards, head bowed, dragging a piece of emu feather rope behind him. You don't ask what it means. Not yet, because now you understand that some meanings aren't explained, they're lived into. The performance builds. Two dancers mimic a fight shield against spear grunts echoing into the dark. You realize it's a reenactment of a dreaming dispute over a stretch of land near the salt plains. You've walked those plains. This map isn't just topographical, it's moral. A reminder of why certain territories are shared and why some are not. And then as suddenly as it began, the beat slows, the steps still. A woman sings a final line, a single note that hovers in the air like smoke, and silence returns. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. The ceremony dissolves. The performers walk away as themselves again. But the map they've drawn remains not on paper, but in everyone's heads, including yours. Later, an elder speaks to the group. She doesn't stand, doesn't command attention, but everyone listens. She talks of a lake that once stretched across this entire plain, a saltwater place full of fish and spirit. The lake is gone now, dried up centuries ago, but she gestures across the land like it's still there, because it is. In the story, in the dance, in the shape of the soil and the salt that remains. You realize then ceremonies like this don't just preserve maps, they remake them. Every performance redraws the territory, refreshes its meaning, reasserts its sacredness. And so you begin to understand why some stories can't be written down, why some paths can't be captured with GPS. Because they're not static, they're participatory. Rehearsed, yes, but always alive. And if the land changes, the stories shift too. Before you return to your sleeping place, a child pulls you by the sleeve and points to a pattern someone has traced in the sand circles, lines, footprints. He doesn't say what it means, just smiles and says it'll change tomorrow. You nod, you're starting to get it. Because, in this place, mapping isn't just remembering, it's becoming. It's deep into the night now, and the wind is cooler, teasing the edges of your blanket with playful fingers. You lie on your back beside the ashes of the fire, staring upward. The sky here is so clear, it's like someone peeled back the atmosphere. You can see every star, every shimmer, every long dead sun flaring faintly in the black. And tonight, you learn the stars aren't just decoration, they're compasses. You sit up as an elder points toward a cluster high above the horizon. See that one, he says. The emu. You squint. There's no emu, just stars. But then he doesn't mean a constellation made of stars. He means the dark space between them. And once he outlines it for you, it clicks the shape of an emu-long neck, stretched out across the Milky Way wings, folded behind. Not stars, but absence. The emu lives in the shadow. You exhale softly. That might be the most poetic piece of astronomy you've ever heard. That emu, the elder continues, tells us when to gather eggs. When her legs stand straight in the sky, the nests are full. You blink. You time egg collecting with the night sky. He nods. And we plant when Orion sleeps. Travel when the dingo climbs. All across the continent, Aboriginal peoples developed sky-based calendars, so precise they could predict animal migration, seasonal rains, and harvest cycles just by observing how certain stars appeared or didn't on the horizon. Historians still argue about how formalized these systems were. Some say they're folk knowledge. Others say they're astronomy disguised as mythology. But either way, they work. And out here, without any calendar app or smartwatch to nag you, you begin to trust the sky. The elder draws in the sand beside you, recreating the Southern Cross. Then he extends two long lines from its axis. That's south, he says simply. And there it is, the oldest compass. No magnet required. Just repetition. Just remembering how the sky spins and resets itself night after night in perfect rhythm with the earth below. You listen as he recounts a story about a boy who got lost chasing a wallaby. The boy ran too far, past the last known water hole, and wandered under the wrong stars. He was found days later by a traveling group who used the position of Venus to track where he'd been. The tale is cautionary, yes, but it's also instructional. Because out here direction and memory are one. You lie back again and trace your finger across the stars. Someone points out the celestial canoe, which matches a real river canoe shape, etched into a rock shelter hundreds of kilometers from here. The stars above mirror the lines on the land below. Not by accident, but by intention. Suddenly a shout goes up. Laughter. The group rushes to a nearby rise, and you follow, still clutching your blanket. Everyone points upward, a shooting star, and immediately two people begin a call and response chant, short clipped phrases in a dialect you don't understand. But it's clear this isn't just stargazing. This is engagement. The shooting star, you learn, can mean many things. A messenger, a spirit moving fast, a sign of someone passing. Interpretations shift by region, even by occasion. But no one just watches. Everyone responds. Later, a young woman leads you to a cleared patch of ground. She kneels, draws a map in the sand, and then overlays a star chart on top of it. The map lines match the visible constellations above. The emu, the dingo, the canoe, the three sister stars. This isn't abstract. This is real navigation plotted with mythology, memory, and precise observation. You ask how she learned all this. She shrugs. Same way you learn to cook. Someone shows you, and you realize, in the West, we send people to school for years to learn celestial navigation. Here, it's taught through stories told around fires, through games, through walking and watching and waiting. Someone hands you a piece of bark. On it, dots of ochre form, a spiral each one, corresponding to a star's movement over the year. Not a perfect replica, but close. A seasonal sky map passed down by hand. You smile. How long have people used this? The response, since before there were words for how long. That's humbling. As you settle back down watching Orion dip behind a hill, you understand that the sky isn't something above. It's something within, a mirror, a guide, a ledger. And when the Milky Way stretches out fully overhead, emblazoned like a celestial highway, you think of the fire lines, the sand drawings, the painted bark, the feet tracing stories in dust, all of them connected. Because no matter the medium flamefoot pigment or star Aboriginal Australians have always known how to draw the world in motion. And tonight, the sky has etched its final verse across your memory. Dawn creeps up behind you, slowly, hesitant like it knows this moment shouldn't be rushed. The sky turns from black to blue to a gentle dusty gold. You sit with your knees pulled to your chest, a little sore, a little smoky, a lot quieter than you were when this all began. Because today you're seeing something you hadn't before, a revival. It begins with a laugh. A group of young guides, maybe teenagers, early 20s, are clustered around a cracked tablet, arguing about how to draw a fire path on a digital map. One of them pinches the screen, zooms in, and uses her finger to trace a familiar curved line you walked just days ago. Another compares it to a painting etched on a piece of bark. They're matching the ancient to the modern, not out of nostalgia, but out of necessity. This was almost gone, says the older man beside you watching the scene. My father wasn't allowed to sing the songs in public. Said it was savage. You blink. But he remembered them anyway. He nods. He sang to the trees, so the trees would remember. You don't quite know how to respond, but something about the image, a man whispering ancient verses to gum trees, lodges itself firmly in your chest. For decades, Aboriginal cultural knowledge, songlines, fire farming, star navigation, sand mapping was dismissed by colonizers as superstition. Worse, it was outlawed, language suppressed, ceremonies banned, children taken, entire ecosystems reshaped under the belief that Western systems knew better. They didn't. Whole regions that had thrived under indigenous fire care fell into ecological collapse. Songlines that guided travel for centuries were bulldozed or fenced off. The living map sung, walked, and painted into being was nearly silenced, but it wasn't lost. because now you're witnessing the quiet, powerful act of return. The younger guides speak both in English and in language. They toggle between touchscreen and ochre. They carry message sticks in one hand and smartphones in the other. And they're not confused. They're composing, remixing ancient memory with modern tools, not to replace, but to extend. You walk with one of them, a young woman with ochre-streaked hands and a quiet, no-nonsense voice. She tells you how she helped conduct a burn on her grandfather's land last month, guided by both satellite weather data and her grandmother's fire songs. And which worked better, you ask? She smirks. The songs. But the app helped. You both laugh. Historians now acknowledge what many denied for years, that Aboriginal people are not of the past. They are active, adaptable stewards of living systems. And that preserving knowledge doesn't mean freezing it in time. It means living it forward. You're led to a school, small, low-roofed, open air. Children are drawing with charcoal on the floor, recreating a path they walked last week. One sings while he draws. Another carefully folds a message stick into a red cloth pouch. Field trip today, the teacher says with a grin, mapping the bush with their feet. No GPS, no worksheets, just movement repetition and laughter. And then you see it, the land being relearned by its own people. Not from textbooks, but from elders. Not as relics, but as tools. Not because it's trendy, but because it works. You sit with an old woman as she scrolls through photos on her grandson's phone. She pauses at an image of her younger self, painted for a ceremony, arms outstretched in the firelight. We danced this story so it wouldn't be forgotten, she says. And you believe her, because here you are decades later, watching that same story walk its way into digital memory. A young man shows you a map on his screen. It looks ordinary until he zooms out. The waypoints aren't cities. They're dreaming sites, songline stops, scarred trees, Coolamon marks, water holes that were once fenced off but have now been reopened, reclaimed, walked again. This one, he says, pointing to a cluster of dots used to be erased. Not anymore. You ask if they'll share it with the world. Only some parts, he says. Some stories are only for us. And again you nod, because now you get it. Not all knowledge is meant to travel. Some of it belongs to the place it was born, and to the people who speak its language. The revival is slow, patient, but it's happening. You see it in the gentle burn lines being drawn again, in the stars being retaught, in the ceremonies no longer hidden, in the land slowly healing under familiar rhythms, and in yourself no longer just a visitor, but a witness. The fire you light this morning is small, just a handful of bark and twig, barely more than a flicker. But you kneel before it like it's something sacred, because it is. Around you, the camp is being gently packed away. No rush, no shouting, just method. Everyone knows what needs doing, and everyone knows that the final step isn't folding up a tent. It's leaving the land as if you were never here. You stir the ashes of the last night's fire into a soft gray circle. The footprints have already been brushed over. The paths retreated into silence again, but your mind is loud, alive, with everything you've seen, felt, sung, and walked. And as you press your hand to the still warm earth, you feel it. You've left a trace. Not a scar. Presence. The elder From your first night, he's here now, silent smiling. He hands you something wrapped in woven bark, a coulamon full of ash ochre and a charred stick. What's this for, you ask? For remembering, he says simply. And that's all he says. You walk out with the group retracing a portion of the trail from your earliest days. But now it's different. The land hasn't changed. You have. You spot features you missed before. A bend in the hill that echoes a movement in the Seven Sisters song. A small scar on a gum tree that tells you someone once passed here, someone long ago who might have carried a message, stick or sand map or bundle of fire seeds. A breeze stirs the spinifex. A few children break off to sing softly, learning by doing, not memorizing by rote. The language is rhythmic, gentle, made of syllables that seem to fit the rise and fall of the ground beneath your feet. Everywhere you look, the land is talking, and you now are learning to listen. Historians often describe Aboriginal cultural memory as fragile, but they're wrong. It's resilient, not fragile. Never was. It's been wrapped in silence, carried in ash, danced into dirt, sung into stars, and now revived by footsteps. You reach a place where the last burn you helped with is still visible. The blackened ground is starting to blush green with new shoots. A few birds dart overhead calling. You kneel and touch the soil again. It crumbles beneath your fingers, soft and alive. It's not just a landscape, it's a library. You've been walking inside an archive written with flame and wind and memory. No walls, no bindings, but page after page after page. And now, as the group begins to disperse, heading back toward homelands, vehicles, or other song lines entirely, you're left alone for a moment beside a small ring of stones. Your fire ring, your first map. You sit quietly staring into it, and then slowly you draw your final fire line. Not with flame this time, but with your finger. A spiral, a dot, a curved track leading nowhere and everywhere. You whisper the one line you remember from a dreaming song. The emu walked this way, and then you rise. The wind catches your hair. You brush the mark away and walk on. Now, let your breath slow down with each sentence. The fire has gone out. The stars above still shine distant and watchful, but you've seen them now for what they are, not just decorations, but signposts, memories, eyes. You've walked where stories walk. You've learned to read smoke like ink, to follow sand like a trail of thoughts. And as your feet move, even in memory, the trail behind you doesn't disappear. It sinks softly into the land like water into dry earth. The cool night air brushes your face. You imagine the emu constellation rising again. Not drawn in stars, but in shadow. That shape between the light, that soft breath between each line of a song, that stillness between the footfalls. Somewhere an elder stirs a pot of ochre. Somewhere a girl sings a path back home. Somewhere flames trace the edge of a clearing, and behind them, green shoots wait curled like promises. You are not walking alone anymore. Every step you take carries the echoes of the oldest maps, ones that do not need paper or screens or even ink. Just movement, intention, and care. So let your eyes close if they haven't already. Let the land hold you now gently as it has held others for millennia. Let the story soften in your mind like footprints fading in dew. And as the last embers cool, you remember this world was always singing. You're just learning how to hear it.